If we look back at the guiding principles upon which the ANC was formed in 1912, how would you capture some of them that perhaps are relevant today?
First, it is true that the party has weathered a number of storms throughout its existence. And when we have new storms, we must not lose sight of the fact that there have been achievements. The fact that we are now in politically free South Africa is itself an achievement, and that success can be laid on the doorsteps of the many heroes and heroines that were involved in the struggle against apartheid, and that also includes other parties. But the party, the ANC, has emerged victoriously. But the ANC had always understood that the struggle is a relay. The total emancipation of African people was not only to emancipate them politically, but also culturally and most importantly, economically. So that is probably the next struggle, the struggle for cultural and economic emancipation. And of course, when you move into uncharted territory, you start having challenges, but also you also have some people for whom the struggle ended in 1994, and some for them the struggle is about being in power, and this is where we find the ANC to be in that perilous state. I say perilous because members of the ANC themselves are beginning to complain that this ANC has deviated from what it stood for. And we've also seen that the people themselves on the ground, the people that it purports to represent, they've also progressively shown that they are losing confidence in the ANC. If you were to look at the simple things like the 2021 local government elections, the message was very clear. For the first time, the ANC lost the major metros. And we've seen throughout its existence, there have been splinter groups. One of the splinter groups that is still intact today is the EFF. You had UDM, you had the COPE. Now there's also another party. But all this indicates is that all is not well within the ANC. And if we were to take the words of somebody like Mavuso Msimang, who had initially resigned and withdrew his resignation, he laid down a number of issues that he was concerned about with the current administration of the ANC. And among which was the notion of the appearing to turn a blind eye on the status of the ANC, corruption, and even went to make some comments about even the leadership that was appointed. He says, if you look at the Secretary Generals of the ANC, from Pixie Asembe and many others, you end up with Mbalula. And he meant to say, we have in here a person who is an embarrassment to what the ANC stands for. The fact that he withdrew his resignation letter does not change his characterization. You also had somebody like Thabo Mbeki, who says, why should I campaign for the ANC? But all you are saying is that there is no story to tell. But there are also real issues that the ANC must contend with. One is the livelihood of African people. And load shedding continues to wreak havoc to the lives of our people in general and Africans in particular. It continues to wreak havoc to the economy. The economy has remained stagnant. And when the ANC celebrated its 112th anniversary, it will have to reflect on all of this. But as I always say, there's also this matter that Thabo Mbeki also raised, the issue of Phala Phala. He raised the issue by saying the manner in which the ANC has dealt with the issue of Phala Phala is itself, it borders on counter-revolutionary in a sense that it undermines the constitution. And he asked the question that does the ANC members of parliament suggest that the president has a case to answer, as the panel pointed out, that he was engaged in conduct that is impeachable. And he reminds them of Ngandla and how the courts had expressed themselves in saying when members of the ANC vote on matters that are serious, especially when they're members of parliament, they need to be guided by a conscience. We've seen the conscience going out of the window in the last few years and also last year. So these are the concerns that will have to be grappled with as the ANC celebrates its 112 years of existence. It cannot shy away from those issues.
Great summation, Professor Seepe, about the guiding principles upon which the ANC was founded, but also importantly, you've taken us to where the ANC finds itself today. I want to latch on to the word you used a little earlier when you said deviations. I want to latch on to that word because I'm going to have us listen now to the Secretary General of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula. And in this instance, he was talking yesterday, making startling admissions about exactly what you've said, deviations that perhaps members of the public would have expected from the ANC not to do, but it engaged in them anyway. Let's take a listen quickly before I pose my next question.
In defense of our president, we went to Parliament and opened an ad hoc committee and said a swimming pool is a fire pool. We are going to swimming pool leyo data. Sayichincha sathi fire pool. Uminister of Police ebile khophe ngaselanga tywala. Ubona ukuthi lento ubuphoki kunzima explain ubuphoki.
Professor Seepe, how big an on goal was this? It's an important admission that the ANC stood firm with a straight face, misleading the public about what actually went on in Nkandla, its construction, and what was, and subsequently what the public was told isn't. So, talk to us about the lies that were told publicly and whether the general public should have confidence in ANC officials when they utter public statements.
Well, the former President Thabo Mbeki says one of the biggest problems of the ANC leadership is to lie all the time. We know how many times we've been told that load shedding would be a thing of the past. And somehow when these members engage in trying to turn on each other, they reveal the truths without even knowing that they are actually exposing themselves. As you rightfully point out, that these are own goals. The ANC no longer needs parties outside to destroy it. It is very capable of destroying itself. In the last 5 years, most of the energy has been, the party has been involved in inter-party battles, and the people have been forgotten. And when the time comes for voting, the ANC members and parliamentarians may not be able to shield themselves from the voters. Because most of these things that are happening, they happen in broad daylight and people are watching. And this is what has led to a number of the mushroom of new parties, because they're saying the Party of Liberation no longer represents us. And the most scathing remarks and the criticism of the ANC comes from within, which it is also correct. But it appears, as and that Ramaphosa points out, looks like this ANC no longer has ears.
Yeah.
It is now a bit heartless. And this way the challenge is. So it will be a tall order for them to try to convince the voters. Remember also we went through a moment of madness when there was something called Ramaphosa. It didn't take long before we moved into Ramarun and what I call now Ramageddon. So the ANC is faced with that reality, including the fact that as they go to the polls, the opposition will be in the courts dealing with the matter of Phala Phala.
Professor Seepe, I'm glad you mentioned Phala Phala because it forms part of my next question to you, but it's going to come yet again in the form of a sound bite from Fikile Mbalula, because in this instance, he seeks to draw parallels between former President Jacob Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa in as far as scandals that have troubled the ANC. But let me not spoil it. Let's have a listen first, and then I'll pose the question later.
Lo president lo wethu akasoza sihluphe. Kwayena ebesithi uyahamba. Samnanda thi egawume kancane emhlekazi. Ethi uya-announce ngo-4 o'clock. Sithi uhamba uyaphi.
So, Prof, in a way there, Fikile Mbalula tells us something that perhaps could best be characterized as a badly kept secret. We were told that it was mere speculation that President Ramaphosa had actually resigned on the back of the Phala Phala scandal, and ANC officials went to his house, I think it was in Cape Town, to convince him not to resign. So we know today that indeed it is a fact that President Ramaphosa, if we are to believe Fikile Mbalula, he actually resigned. And so I want you, Prof, to draw these parallels for me, because Fikile Mbalula says, Jacob Zuma, you've troubled us for many years, scandal after scandal, but we stood firm, we stood behind you and defended the indefensible. He even uses that term. And then we have a new president now, whom you are so intolerant of that you've chosen to go and establish the MK party. And yet, this president was willing to resign on the back of the Phala Phala scandal. Is he correct in drawing those parallels between the two?
Well, the most important thing is that President Ramaphosa came in and placed the standard very high to say, I'm incorruptible, and I'm accountable, and I'm transparent. Then when that was shown not to be true, and when you had the most scathing commentary by a panel that was chaired by a judge, which pointed out to a series of violations, some of the constitutional nature and some of the criminal nature, he felt that he is actually cornered. But you have now people whose existence is dependent on him. So it was their duty to make sure that they protect their interest by saying, you are not going anywhere. But as I say, all these things are things that are going to play themselves out in the public as the matter go to court and as opposition parties begin to take advantage of the president who's got his back against the wall.
Prof. Seepe, let's conclude the conversation with perhaps one final question, and that is how the ANC is likely to fare in this election, because it would seem, I mean, you've already made reference to how Mavuso Msimang characterized Fikile Mbalula's leadership of the office that he holds. And to some degree, is Fikile Mbalula perhaps a person that will likely bring the ANC to its knees purely because of his public comments that will get this party to be even more disliked by members of the public? Or should we actually be doing the inverse? Appreciate what he is doing, which is to tell us the truth about some of the lies that have gone on in order for the public to make up its mind about whether or not the ANC can be trusted?
Well, there will be own goals, there will be statements that are revealing, but there's also the reality of South Africans. President Ramaphosa was presented somebody under whom the economy will grow, and a number of things were going to be resolved, energy crisis, unemployment. That did not happen. And 2021, members of the public said, no, we are moving away from this party. And the ANC has not improved. Its conduct has been less inviting to voters. So if 2021 was not a wake-up call, you can see what is going to happen in 2024. That members have already declared, and even ANC itself has already accepted the possibility of not having an outright win. So I do not think the fortunes look good for the ruling party.
Well, talking about fortunes, I can't let you go without posing the question about exactly the stance that President Jacob Zuma has decided to take lately, and that is to be a backer, because I think that's the best way to describe it right now. He's not resigned from the ANC, but he says, I'm choosing to campaign for a different political party because this one of Cyril Ramaphosa, these are his words, by the way, this one of Cyril Ramaphosa, I no longer recognize. How much of what former President Zuma is doing is about political survival, and what are the chances?
Well, I think it's all of the above. One is that the ANC is failing. Two, there is a view that says internally the ANC cannot be changed, and that it will be up to the ANC to respond to and up to the voters. But nonetheless, the message has come out very clearly from the former President Thabo Mbeki and also Zuma and people like Ramaphosa.
Professor Sipho Seepe, thank you very much for your time and indeed analysis of what is going on in the African National Congress.